Welcome to the Week in Sports Cars on the Marshall Pruett podcast, presented by Cooper Tires and supported this month of May by our friends at Bell Racing Helmets USA. Graham Goodwin, tell us how you are across the pond on this beautiful, beautiful Wednesday. Wednesday? It's Wednesday. It's Friday, but
it's Friday.
My mouth is already blowing. The pop-off valve is working already. It's Friday afternoon.
It's the month of May, mate. It's you excuse this one. It's not quite as lovely here. We've had some lovely, lovely weather in the last few days, but beginning to get towards a kind of stormier part of time. I'm just trying to clear the decks ahead of what actually should be quite a nice motorsport weekend. Not that they aren't all nice, with a bit of time at Brands Hatch with some historic racing cars. Ooh. Looking forward to that one. So maybe a little bit more about that next week. But yeah, it's been busy. But of course, while you're very, very busy, it's on the cusp of getting an awful lot busier for us with next weekend test day, and after that we get into race week for the Le Mans 24 Hours.
Where shall we start on news, my friend? And maybe more analysis than news, if possible.
Well, let's have a quick word about one of the issues du jour at the moment is what's going on about the setup for the Le Mans 24 Hours with equivalency of technology in LMP1, with balanced performance in GTE. I don't know about you, but I don't particularly feel like digging into the specifics here, but I am ready to have a bit of a rant about a generality.
We're opening with a rant. This is awesome. Go.
You can tell I've been botting it. It's this simple. We talk, we have a bit of a joke about, we don't allow it more than 3 times, etc., etc., etc. There is a reality. This is now part and parcel of the show, part and parcel of the regulations, part and parcel of what keeps the racing close, which is supposed to help the stability of our racing. But there's a missing link here, I think, and the latest decisions on the equivalency between the Toyotas, LMP1 hybrids, and the non-hybrids, and again rather underlines something that's been bubbling away with me for a while, which is, I get it and I understand it, and I think the problem is that because there's not enough explanation of specific methodology or even the kind of the philosophy behind what's happening here, we're now getting to the stage where, by dint of being absent in the debate, the powers that be are beginning to lose the faith of those that are actually paying to watch this product. They are now to the stage where the majority of them appear to believe that this is all a great big setup, and it's being put in place to effectively gift Toyota a race to a championship. Now, I'll be honest with you, don't believe that for a second. I think there are some inbuilt measures there that are designed to encourage people to come and play at the very highest level, but I don't think it's as cut and dried as some people, a lot of people unfortunately now, are beginning to actually imply. But I think it's now time that the rule makers actually stepped up and started to explain more clearly and better exactly what it is they're doing and why it is they're doing it.
Oh, so hold on. You're saying, your opinion, a sanctioning body should explain things and make it plain and known why they carry out particular behaviors.
I know, ridiculous, isn't it? Yes.
Stop it. Yeah. Stop it, Graham Goodwin. Bad Graham. And we actually, I think your call to not go too deeply into this right now is perfect, because we do have a question or two waiting for us to answer, which we're going to get to actually somewhat quickly today, since we only have about an hour. We're going to save some of that for Q&A, which I think is a lovely thing. Let's move on to the next topic, and it is an unfortunate one. Leena Gade, our friend Leena Gade, no longer a Verizon IndyCar Series race engineer. I'm sure you heard about that, and probably have some questions about it. It's not as if I have every answer, Graham, unfortunately, but tell me what you would like to know, or how I can help. And
well, I think the answer is here. I mean, clearly it's news that's been breaking over the last 24, 48 hours. It's very sad. It was, Leena, one of the best known race engineers across the planet, and hugely successful, of course. making that move across to IndyCar. We know that is a kind of a very, I don't know how you describe it, MP, a very specialist part of the engineering code, if you like. And I guess we don't really know how to take this at the moment. Is this that things have gone horribly wrong? Is it the fact that Leena's been unhappy? Is it the fact that whatever the input's been, it's not worked? You know, words like scapegoat I know have been trotted around on the internet. That's a fine institution of truth that the internet obviously is. What's going on?
Well, there's a lot of things you've mentioned that are both accurate and inaccurate, or could use some clarification based on, again, what you have seen on the interwebs. I guess the first thing to mention is this was not something spurred on by James Hinchcliffe's failure to qualify for the Indy 500. And I should also apologize to folks. We normally try and do this in a quiet, serene setting, but we're 2 days before the Indy 500, and although I've been here and some of us have been here for a couple weeks, this is when everybody who gets credentialed from outlets you've never heard of turn up and things start to get loud. Plus, there are going to be some press conferences, so apologies, but this is what the media center is right now. Honestly, Graham, the bump day meltdown, the bump day dramas, where the team itself made numerous errors that caused James Hinchcliffe to fail to qualify, or fail to get another run to try and qualify. Completely unrelated, completely separate from Leena. There's nothing to attach between Leena and everything that went down from approximately 5 p.m. to 5:50 p.m. We can also say, and I know this, I know this is a fact, this breakdown in the relationship between herself and the team is not something that started at Indianapolis, and I would not even portray her relationship with the team as being bad, but just in terms of an effective working situation. Confidence held on both sides. I know that this was something that started going sideways as early as March. So that's also something which, you know, if we're looking at the narrative of Hinchcliffe fails to qualify for the Indy 500, has, as I've written, the world's most influential race engineer. You know, we're going to look back and thank Leena for all the young women and girls who either want to get into racing on a technical side or just other areas that are technically minded outside of motor racing. But we have a situation where this engineer who we've all come to know and love in sports car racing from the outside would appear to have failed in this new discipline of high-powered, high-profile open-wheel racing in North America. We can say a couple things for sure, and this is just trying to fill in general areas of curiosity. Not saying that this has some defined narrative and everything is perfect and going to come out to, output a perfect summary in the end. But I can say that her skills and abilities on road and street courses, definitely, Graham, no question about those. And I would say that she certainly added value to the team while she was with them. James Hinchcliffe, coming into the Indy 500, holding fifth in points, had a podium at Barber Motorsports Park recently, second place, and had all top 10 finishes elsewhere. So those are all the good things. We also need to be honest and fair in saying that the team not only brought in Leena to be James' race engineer, but they also hired Todd Malloy from Chip Ganassi Racing, formerly of the Andretti team and a few others, really high level, to be their new technical director. And with that in mind, this is not taking away from Leena. This is not trying to discredit her at all. I mean, there's no... All of us want and had hoped this would work out and hope that this does not impact her in any way, shape, or form going forward. But we should be honest in saying that Hinchcliffe's ability to run up front and to be fifth in the points is a combination of both a talented rookie engineer, having never been to most of these tracks, never engineered this type of car on road and street courses, but it also is heavily, heavily supported beneath this Graham with the work of Todd Malloy, as technical director to help turn this team around in the off season. And you put those two things together, and you have very strong performances from not only Hinch, but also Robert Wickens, who looked like he could have won a couple of IndyCar races by now. So I realize we're talking IndyCar, but I'm just trying to give a little bit of background on where things maybe, what things were, the reality of what things were going on at Schmidt-Peterson Motorsports with Leena. So if you take the fact that Blair Perschbacher, Robert Wickens' engineer, has always been known as good, but has never been hailed as a great engineer, has nearly won a couple races this year. And you look at the fact that Hinch has been strong as well. Again, there's an underlying layer here coming from the technical director's input, working with his engineers to help lift everything. It means that Hinch's success was not done in isolation with Leena. It also means that Hinch's success so far was not done solely because of Todd Malloy. But it is important to understand this was not 100% anyone's responsibility. It was a bit of a shared thing between race engineer and technical director. The other thing I'll mention, Graham, which is weird, and I have asked, and I have not gotten I've not gotten answers. I've been told, refer to our official statements about we've had conversations and mutually agreed to part ways. Leena's struggles on the ovals, which were apparent right away, it's a big surprise. That was obviously the big thing, Graham, for her to learn. That was always going to be the automatic shortcoming with someone coming over having never engineered a car in the ovals. I've read a number of things you might have as well, Nate, where folks have said, well, what the heck? She's brand new to this, and you're not giving her enough time, nor are you guys supporting her enough, and therefore that's the reason for the failure. And I can't disagree with some of that. But I would also say that if we keep in mind there was an expectation that with someone of her caliber and reputation that although ovals were new, she would indeed be able to start picking them up at whatever rate the team thought was reasonable. The fact that they have let her go would suggest they did not believe whatever internal target they set for her growth-wise was not being met. So I know that it might be a slight shade difference here, but that's a lot different to me than, you didn't become an instant master of ovals, you're fired. I think it was more a case of they might have seen some things that led them to believe this was not going to be resolved in what they consider to be a reasonable timeline. Mention one other thing, Graham, and this comes back to the scapegoat topic. With Leena's struggles on the ovals, as I have just learned, the team started phasing in their technical director, Todd Malloy, to carry more of the load on the ovals. And especially last weekend was brought in, I don't know exactly what percent, but very heavily on the engineering side, essentially to try and step in and make that work positively. I'm not 100% sure where Todd was in engineering the car completely or not, but I would say that if you consider everything that has gone on, you can't really blame Leena for James failing to qualify in terms of a lack of speed. And let me throw one other thing here, and then I can either try and answer some more for you, or we can move on to another topic, Graham. What's worse? Leaving her on the timing stand, failing, and it being 100% her fault on ovals, or effectively pulling her back and pulling her back and pulling her back to the point to where she's almost not even working, not even on the job, or barely on the job when they're at an oval like this. I'm not sure which one is worse, which one shows either a lack of confidence or something along those lines, where it's just really unfortunate to see how things pan out. So frustrating, without a doubt, but I'm fairly confident she will land very quickly in something, especially with Le Mans right around the corner.
Zero doubt of that. And, whatever, if you are listening or somebody's relaying this to you, Leena, I know we all wish you well. The ins and outs, we live in a very public world in international motorsport. The ins and outs of a career can be something of a hostage to fortune at times. And, you and I, Marshall, aren't used to having the ins and outs of the rights, wrongs, whys and wherefores of our career open to this level of debate. And there's an element of my...
Well, there is the comment section, mate, and Facebook and Twitter.
Yes.
I wake up every day to a series of lovely, you become numb to it. Where
I don't read it.
But,
I don't read it.
That really angers me because I spend a lot of time writing stuff in the comment section under fake names about you and just tearing you apart. So if you're not reading it, Goodwin, we've got a problem.
I can tell it's the way you actually express yourself with all those commas. I can tell it's you straight away, mate. But look, Leena, best of luck. Whatever comes next, best of luck. Let's wait and see what is the next step for Leena Gade. She's given very many of us immeasurable entertainment with her efforts on behalf of Audi Sport, since then, of course, with Bentley and now across with IndyCar. What's next? Well, let's wait and see.
Let's talk about something that doesn't involve a highly talented person losing their job or balance of performance / equivalency of technology. I understand a rather inspirational Frenchman is going to have some good news coming. Since this podcast is being recorded Wednesday, Friday morning, and I believe the news is either on its way out or close to imminent. I don't know if you want to give away. Don't give away too much.
Well, no, I can tell you.
DailySportsCar.com.
Well, it will be DailySportsCar.com. We're going to get a bit of a heads up for this one through our friends Frederick Sausset and those of you that follow the Le Mans 24 Hours and the stories that revolve around it will remember back in 2016, the Garage 56 program, which looks after innovation in motorsport, and in 2016 they chose to look at an astonishing project, which was a quadruple amputee, Fred Sausset, French businessman, afflicted by a terrible flesh-eating virus, lost the extremities of all 4 limbs. And Fred, together with Christophe Tonto, an astounding of engineering talent, was given the opportunity to race at the 125 an adapted LMP2 car, somewhat overweight because of the kit on the car, but finished the race. An astonishing achievement for Fred and the team. After that, made it clear that he was going to step away from his own driving, but actually use the experiences that he'd garnered and bring that forward in the academy for other mobility impaired drivers, and that's exactly what will be happening. That first team is now together. Very first time. We'll race this weekend for the very first time in adapted LMP3 car. That comes with ready, as have the first 3 drivers. Belgian guy, Nigel Bailey, lost after a motocross accident in 2004. Frenchman, Sanusi Ben Moussa, who has come with SOT1 Fred's team recruiting, and actually a gentleman I'm privileged to say that I've met several times before, Takuma Yoki, an ex-MotoGP rider, lost his use of his legs in I think it's about 1998, but actually is a winner of an ACO title. He won the GT Cup title with TKS, his team in the Asia Le Mans Series, GT Cup Porsche, and is back as part of this team. Great to see Fred back in action with this one. You may remember this was the same effort that was associated briefly with Billy Monga, but moving on, of course, to do other things with Carlin in yeah. But this is the start of something big. There are active negotiations underway with the ACO about this team and perhaps these drivers having a part in the Le Mans 24 Hours in the not too distant future. I'm delighted they're back. I think Fred is an absolute inspiration, and great news to see that they're bringing an effort to the tracks with some guys I'm sure will inspire others with either similar disabilities or indeed other disabilities to come forward and have a crack.
Amen to that. We've got two other things to cover off quickly, Graham. One being Spirit of Daytona Racing, which has taken 2 races off after, frankly, a lot of gut punches as well of their own. Big crashes earlier in the year. Thankfully, they're going to be back now with actually, I still need to check in and see if the tub was capable of being saved in any way, shape, or form, either as a spare or otherwise, but knowing that they needed to essentially build a brand new car after Tristan Vautier's giant accident in turn 17 at Sebring. They're going to be back for Detroit, so good on them, having missed 2 rounds, but happy they'll be back nonetheless. And then let's close on the little fun stuff here. Saturday night in Indianapolis at the former Museum of Art. Yes, they have a Museum of Art here in Indianapolis. We are going to have the global premiere of new Adam Carolla racing documentary titled Uppity, the life, career, and story of one William Theodore Ribbs, Willie T. Ribbs, absolute legend of the sport, mostly in sports cars, but also has his barrier-breaking 1991 Indy 500 performance, also some NASCAR in there, and I can tell you, Graham, that as someone whose ugly mug will unfortunately be seen in and during the documentary, got a chance to see I don't know, I guess I might call it a rough cut back in November, and it was fairly powerful. So just going to be aired right now in theaters. I don't quite have a date for when it's going to be coming to Blu-ray or DVD or streaming, but I'm sure that those things are coming soon. But just kind of cool to see someone like a Willie T, absolute firebrand, absolute controversial character, says everything that he thinks and makes sure you know it. I'm glad that some folks who aren't just the old heroes and the beloved types, so whether we just wax on about, oh, they made my life so wonderful by watching them drive. Yeah, Willie T was there kind of setting things on fire whenever he takes it. So I'm glad that we have, a personality like Willie's also being celebrated in documentary form.
Isn't this a great kind of time? Isn't it, with the relative economy of the way in which you can put together pretty high quality stuff? Isn't this a great time to be someone who actually is a student of the sport and a student of sports history MP? There's so many of these. I know the thing that you guys put together with Ayrton Senna's test. Just other than that resource, you'd have to go digging very, very deep in a very dusty bookshop to find any reference of it. But the opportunity now to just hear from the people who were there, to see some of the things that were actually going on. I just think it's a wonderful time. In part the innocence is gone, that you've not looked that hard anymore, but I just think it's a wonderful thing. And, guys like Willie T. Ribbs, a guy, by the way, I know so little about, therefore will learn so much when I finally do get to see that piece of I think it's a great thing for racing fans and fans of all sorts of sports and other areas of life, that people with real passion are putting their efforts behind telling these stories.
Well, I have nothing but affirmation and positive things to say about your statement there. So I know some of the other things they're hoping to do, Carolla's team led by Nate Adams and such. So one of them, which would be cool if it comes to pass, is a documentary on the narcotics-fueled 1980s IMSA scene. So that would be, and I should say, fueled financially from the sales of narcotics compared to the consumption, although that we can assume there was probably some of that as well. But I'm hoping.
I say one other thing about just not on the same kind of vein, but just in the kind of periphery of the headline setters, the headline makers in motorsport. Look out for something. We'll talk about this, I'm sure, next week's show, MP, before we get into the melee that is Le Mans, for something we're working on right now on Daily Sports Car. A remarkable tale from two guys I knew very little about the background for, but if the interview that we've done with them gets signed off, a remarkable tale of why it is you should take gentleman drivers very, very seriously, because you never ever know what might come up. Look for that next week, and trust me, you'll enjoy this one, because this could be something very, very significant for the future of the sport.
Well, the first question we have to dive into, we have a little bit, just over a half an hour, so I think we're going to get the most of them. First one would be for you, coming in from David Faulkner. Any chance of Ginetta getting a look into the next LMP2 chassis supplier list? He said, surely there's a strong case. Now they are in LMP1 and coming into LMP3.
Well, can be back into LMP3, I think, but David, you're absolutely right. I think the answer is, well, they should be. It's as simple as that. If you're going to get any company, doesn't matter who it is, investing in the ladder, it makes only sense. I only believe it makes complete sense that you should support that investment. At the moment, effectively with Ginetta, and the reason, by the way, if you've not caught up with this news, ACO have now announced that the next round of LMP3 chassis licenses will go to Ligier, will go to Norma, Duquesne Engineering, will go to Ades, who've been somewhat dormant of late, but have had investment from Juan Carlos Tavares, who is the CEO of Peugeot Citroën, etc., and Ginetta. Now, Ginetta, of course, were the first takers for LMP3 back in 2015, won the first European Le Mans Series Championship, but then there was a bit of a fallout between Lawrence Tomlinson from Ginetta and principally Orica, who supply the spec powertrain. Ginetta have stepped back into the ring and said, let's have another crack at this, let's make this work. One other quick thing to say, it has been flagged up that there is going to be a power boost for the LMP3 powertrain. No sign that we're going to change from the Nissan V8. It certainly has the option to actually pour out a few more ponies. So let's wait and see what comes in with that. Should they go for an LMP2? I know they're interested. They were interested in the first instance. They were unlucky, I think, not to get the four licenses that went the way of Orica, Ligier, Dallara and Riley Multimatic. But, you have to say at the moment, I'd have suggested to you, MP, that if the LMP1 project shows the kind of, at least the promise that we're hoping to see at Le Mans in a couple of weeks' time, and if the revised design that we're going to see from Ginetta for LMP3 comes forward and finds favour, why wouldn't you give it to Ginetta?
Yeah, I mean, again, great point. Just also an interesting thing to continue thinking about awarding, right? Again, I don't want to... You've opened the show on a rant, and I'm going to go ahead and leave that as it is, because that was a beautiful thing. But I still struggle with the concept of, we're going to pre-select who can build cars for... if the market will bear interest from however many people want to get in, I just struggle to see the placing some sort of limit or having to be officially nominated and allowed to do such a thing. I'm not saying that anyone should just randomly be able to take part. Obviously, you would need to connect with the sanctioning body, with whichever, whomever is controlling the cars that will be racing. But again, it just seems weird to me. And as we've seen with LMP2, we had a couple of, we had some shortcomings displayed with one model. We had some massive shortcomings displayed with another model, and they've almost, they've done almost no business since. I'm not upset that they were allowed to be a constructor. I just think it's a little silly when you limit participation if there happen to be more that want to get in. So I'll leave that at that. Let's move on.
I'll add just one little bit with that, because the reasoning, if we all recall, was that there appeared to be some concern that a couple of so-called boutique projects might effectively spend way more money than was planned on an LMP2 car. They were the Dome, Stracker's Dome, the S103 and the S&P Racing BR01. Well, S&P Racing have since commissioned an LMP1 car, so that's job done, I guess, from the ACO's point of view there. Straka, however, have left ACO Rules Racing and went GT Racing instead. I sat down with Nick Leventis at Silverstone last weekend. He's very happy with his choices. So the net result of that decision was to remove a manufacturer and a team from the sport. I think that was an ill-judged move, and I said so at the time. I continue to think so. So, yeah, we can move on.
Nice. We're going to jump to Don Gregory, who asks, where do we think Leena will end up? Are there any prototype teams you think? Well, let me step back a little bit. One of the things I was aware of, and this is from speaking directly to Leena a few months ago, she did have options to jump into the WEC, and I believe IMSA as well. And she said it just felt like she would be repeating the same thing that she's already done to a fairly high level. But that, Graham, then leaves the question of, well, if you're out of a job and employment is truly, a top priority, meaning instead of, hey, I'm going to take 6 months off and just, travel the world or be, simplify things. If she is looking to get right back in and to keep income coming in, she might have to, go against that thing that was getting to be a little bit rote for her and jump right back into sports cars. So again, there's some levels of assumption here, but if she does want to jump back in, who do you think at Le Mans might be in need?
I think it's a little late for Le Mans, although, consultancy is a fabulous thing and a fabulous word, isn't it? But looking forward, where are there areas that someone of Leena's talent might actually find? I think Super GT is coming forward very rapidly indeed. There, of course, there's the fabulousness that is a proper tyre war. But then not that far beyond that, we are then talking about a new round of LMP, rather top level, as it seems to me increasingly obvious it's not going to be called LMP1. I think we're going to see some new and exciting projects from some places we've not seen them before, and we're beginning to hear pretty positive vibes from a number of organisations that I'm sure she'd be pretty close to the top of a wish list if her phone was starting to ring. Don't count out seeing Leena back. If I was Leena, I think what I'll probably be doing at the moment is doing exactly what you just pointed towards, which is get some time away from the track, get some time away from the politics, get some time away from the melee that is caused by a news cycle. It's not the first time she's been there, and I'm sure she'd prefer it, but this was probably the last. So let's wait and see what comes out of it. But I've zero doubt that her phone's already been ringing, and zero doubt too that we'll see her back at the track very, very soon.
Well, yet another amen to you. It's not as if I didn't want to have her here and others didn't want to have her here at Indianapolis, but again, to your point, I think there will be no shortage of callers, just a question of who has a genuine need and also who has a genuine budget. That's the other thing that from some of what I've read on the interwebs, there's, Toyota will hire, this team will hire. Where you go, okay, they might, but she would not come cheaply, so this would be a fairly big budget line item, and those budgets don't just magically inflate because someone becomes available. So a little bit more complicated than, she's free. Folks just have tons of money to throw at her, or any engineer for that case. We've already cracked the door open on this, but here we're going to start to get into a couple of EOT-related items, Graham. This from Adam Bowman, with the Privateer LMP1 cars so completely thrashed at Spa. What is the purpose of the ACO dialing back those cars even further?
It's a reasonable question. I think you're right, we have answered part of it already. Let's have a bit of a crack at trying to give this a little bit of balance, okay? Because it's quite difficult in the current circumstances to do that, and I readily acknowledge that. The reality is that what's been accepted from day one is that the cars should have pretty similar, not identical, but pretty similar one-lap pace or even stint pace, that somewhere along the lines of across a particular stint that you should have about half a second slower on track, and you lose a further half a second in the pits if you're a non-hybrid car. And that the hybrid cars will go longer on efficiency, despite the fact that, of course, they're carrying far, far less fuel. So the message is there on behalf of those organisations, or in this case, that organisation, Toyota, that has invested very heavily indeed in exactly the technology that they've been encouraged to do so by the sanctioning body. So effectively here, what we've got is a bit of a stack-up of a situation. Where do I start to lose my my patience with it? Well, the other part of the monologue, if you like, is that to win, Toyota have got to be absolutely fault-free. And the reality is at Spa that they weren't, because one of the cars started a lap down and still lapped the field. There is the flip side, though, of two things taken into account here, MP. Number one is all of these non-hybrid cars are still very, very new. Only 3 of those cars effectively ran relatively trouble-free.
Yeah.
Arguably 2 and arguably 1 when you take into account the rebellion that was excluded for wearing the plank too much. Neither yet have we seen the rebellions running competitively with their low drag bodywork. They run in testing at Monza. There is concern, I know, that 2 or 3 things are coming into play here. One, and I've heard this from multiple people in the non-hybrid pack, that they are more efficient on fuel than even they and their engine makers believe they would be. That's a combination of efficient engine and very efficient aerodynamics. The second thing is that not enough of those cars have done enough running yet for the ACO to be confident the numbers they've got are accurate. Now, principal amongst those, of course, is competitors. Part of the deal that retains their 24-hour slot around having to do some testing. I believe they either are in the process of doing that right now or have now done that. But I think this is all about making sure that the numbers you have got are the correct numbers against the deal that's been reached between the factory team, Toyota, the non-hybrid teams, remaining LMP1 cars, and let's wait and see what happens post-Le Mans. Am I happy with the current situation? No, I'm not. Do I accept that this is a price you've got to pay for exactly where we are right now in what has been a pretty chaotic cycle? I sort of do. Yes, I'd prefer we had one set of rules and that everybody just went out and raced. Today, here, now, that's not a practical proposition, unfortunately. It is about retaining what we've actually got to move forward. I think it will inevitably get better for a number of reasons. But for right now, I'm afraid we've got a kind of confluence of 2 things. One is, I think the fan base is losing faith with the principles and the practices behind it. 2 is, I genuinely think that the powers that be, the rule makers, are actually struggling to get this right.
You know, I am drastically overdue here and embarrassed, but as again we figured out, I'm a little bit sleepy in the head. But I embarrassed my friend that I have not mentioned that today's podcast is supported by our friends at Bell Racing Helmets USA. If you're in town this month, the month of May, and it's almost over, but if you're in town this month, as we're getting ready for the Indy 500, be sure to stop by their new location on Main Street in Speedway, Indiana. It's actually just less than a quarter mile away from Turn 1 here, so that's pretty amazing, Graham. Synonymous with safety, innovation, performance, and engineering excellence, Bell is trusted by more champion drivers than any other brand. 19 of the 35 drivers entered for the Indy 500 are Bell users, so the numbers don't lie, my friend. So if you do happen to be in town, stop in, get some merchandise, check out their new facility, or if you want to have fun from the interwebs, from wherever you happen to be, check out bellracing.com. Let's move on. Andrew Baca, Mr. Baku here, follows along on this EOT balancing type thread. This is a quick game for the two of you in the lead up to Le Mans, and we'll burn a reference to EOT. Good on you. Thanks for helping us to keep count here, Andrew. Would you rather have the leading LMP1 privateers be too slow at Le Mans relative to Toyota, leading to a boring race, or the LMP1 privateers be too fast at Le Mans relative to Toyota, leading to a race in penalties and fuel flow adjustments? I know this doesn't answer your question, and the question is awesome, Andrew. Barring maybe the rebellions, maybe, I'm not 100% sure we're going to have most of the LMP1 privateers still playing by the time we get to, I don't even want to say the finish line. Just reliability-wise, knowing that we have a couple power plants that are relatively new, knowing from what we've seen from electronic shutoffs, Graham, and all kinds of other issues, I'm not totally sure that whatever the rules might be to speed up or slow down, etc., I'm just not sure the numbers are going to be there, even at the halfway point, just from a reliability standpoint. So that might not answer the question, Andrew, but that was the first thing that came to mind. I just think the Toyotas are going to more or less be on their own after a while. But then they've had this I've heard, rumor, Graham, the Toyotas have had reliability problems in recent years. No proof to that fact.
Really?
Just rumors.
Listen, mate, if they can get to the final lap, they'll be absolutely fine. No, hang on a minute. No. Well, let's wait and see. Literally anything. How many times have our good friends at Radio Show Limited, IMSA Radio, said this? Until that flag flies, you just don't know. The drama just seems to happen, and it seems to particularly happen in the modern era. I completely agree with you, by the way. I had a fascinating conversation, again at Silverstone, the paddock, with, I have to say, the most astounding trio of people I've ever had the privilege to be a part of. One was Martin Brundle, one was Sebastian Vettel's father, and the other was little me. And we started talking about karting and junior Formula through Formula One, and ended up talking, as we might, because of course Martin's son Alex is going to be part of the Ginetta LMP1 squad in the number 6 car. Started talking about what would you do in the situation where you've not got enough miles with a package that as yet is unproven in terms of the endurance side of things. I think there's one answer and one answer only, and I think this is what we're going to see from probably a number of the LMP1 cars. What you have to do in that situation is be quicker than an LMP2 car. You have to be very clean in the pits, and you have to work very hard to be as reliable as you can on track, not rattling the curbs and not taking any chances in traffic. You just have to sacrifice a bit of pace for reliability and to keep out of trouble. And then the fickle finger of the South fate will determine where you're going to be come Sunday afternoon. That, I think, is how we're going to see a number of these teams race up on this year. It oddly enough, actually brings us back to being something of an old-fashioned race, doesn't it? We've got very used to, in recent years, perhaps not with the hybrids in the last couple of years, but very used to cars being super reliable and super quick. Maybe instead of it being an absolute record-breaking race this year, maybe what we're going to see is actually the pit crews and the guys in the garage coming into play for who knows what could still be a podium or better.
A podium or better, like a quadruple win? That would be fun.
I tell you right now, if there's one thing beyond the kind of the current criticism of the situation between the hybrids and non-hybrids that comes forward in every single conversation, there is always that postscript that says, or Toyota can find another way to lose it. You know, it is part of every single conversation. Now, I'm not a fan of that, but there is a reality that it's probably fair comment. You know, we've had everything from, you know, a 50-cent piece braking on the car to stop the car as it crossed the line to start the very last lap, through to another driver going out to wish Toyota well, leading indirectly to the elimination of the car from the race. I mean, short of a meteor strike or indeed a bear attack in the garage because there are Canadians in the race, Paul Delaunay is going to be there. The Bears, I'm sure, will be. Yeah, it's this Musk, I think. It's the Musk that actually they follow. It's the Canadian Musk. But anything could happen. And that is why we keep coming back to this astonishing event and other events on the calendar that sit alongside it. There is something about an endurance race. And by an endurance race, mate, I absolutely regard the Indy 500 as an endurance race. It is a race where just anything can and does happen. And the sport continues to astound us.
Last year's race, I looked last night, 3 hours and 13 minutes. So it is longer than a standard IMSA WeatherTech Sports Car Championship round. So I guess there is a little something there. All right, let's jump to some other questions here, mate. We've got about 15 minutes or so left on the clock. And actually, we're also going to get loud here in about 6 minutes when the final hour of practice for the Indy 500 kicks off here on Carburation Day, where carburation is no longer a thing, but that's fine. Let's move to Mateus Longo. He says, "Hi, Marshall and Graham. It looks like the topic of the week is the EOT BOP for LMP1 prior to Le Mans. He says, do you have the feeling that I have that the ASO and FIA are kind of giving Toyota a, quote, thank you present for sticking with the FIWC Super Season and making their lives easier with so many changes to their rival LMP1 contenders?"
I'll turn that on its head, actually. Are they getting a thank you note? No. First and foremost, Toyota have been taking a lot of stick lately.
Yeah.
And there is an element of how much of an edge do you need, but let's not forget two things. Number one, they're still here. They didn't have to be. Number two, let's not forget what happened back in 2012 when they weren't supposed to be an inaugural entrant for the very first FIWEC, when Peugeot pulled out, way, way too late. That would have been the
time for a thank you present.
Wouldn't it just? They stepped up, and they exposed what was basically a development car to competition. And since then, they've been an ever-present since the early part of the 2012 season. So I'm not really at home to terribly much blunt, criticism of Toyota. I ask you this: would it be fair, having spent what they've spent against a rule book that they agreed, with their two major competitors pulling out for different reasons, would it be fair to expect them to sit quietly by while people come in on a tenth the budget and are effectively allowed to go directly head-to-head? I still think you are going to see exciting moments with the LMP1s at Le Mans 24 Hours, because we'll wait and see how the low drag kits perform. But if everything we've seen so far proves to be correct at Le Mans, and Le Mans is a completely different kettle of fish than anything else we've had so far, I think you're going to see non-hybrids at certain parts of the race go by Toyotas in a straight line. We saw P2 cars coming pretty close last year, and these are quicker, lighter cars with better aerodynamics. I think you're still going to get some excitement there. Do I think Toyota are the favourites? Of course they're the favourites. Why wouldn't they be the favourites? But do I think it's going to be quite as much of a pushover? No, I don't. And one of the reasons you've seen adjustments here is because Le Mans is different. Very different. Very, very different indeed. Let's wait and see what happens at test day. Let's wait and see what happens in race week. And then let the critics let fly from there on in. Because remember, they get two chances at Le Mans this season to get it right.
I love the fact that in this argument for Le Mans and Toyota and LMP1 privateers, we've essentially just made the same argument and complaint taking place in the prototype category in IMSA, with the DPI constructors, manufacturers saying, hey, we're spending a ton on these. The idea that anyone can go and buy a spec LMP2 car and in theory, through balanced performance, rock up and beat us. Granted, again, this is what they signed up for, just as Toyota did, just as the LMP1 privateers signed up for, but it's the same base argument. We're a manufacturer, we're spending a lot of money, we don't think someone else should be able to turn up with some turnkey, mass-produced thing and beat us at a fraction of the price. Not saying again, everyone has their own opinion on that, but same arguments being made both at Le Mans and in America. Let's see.
That brings you nicely on, actually, to Michael Wallace's question, who says, don't mind the idea of having DPI's global P2 separated, but how do you tell teams that want to compete for overall wins they can't win in the top class? Core probably knows they won't win with John Bennett driving. No offence to him, but JDC sure wants to win. How do you tell privateers teams, sorry you can't compete for overall wins when they don't get a chance to buy DPI? I guess my answer there, MP, and I'd be keen to hear what you've got to say, is make sure they get the chance to buy DPI. JDC has 2 Orica chassis. Who's to say that when we get into 2019, they couldn't be accurate DPIs?
Yeah, again, it all comes down to the manufacturer agreements between the DPI constructors and IMSA, and the fact that there is no verbiage compelling them to sell cars to anybody if they don't want to. And that is, honestly, that's the sticking point. As long as the DPI manufacturers have the ability to say, nope, we're doing a 2-car factory team, period, well, that's where we end up with situations like the one we have right now, where, and I believe, as I've mentioned here many times before, having spoken to the JDC Millers, the Performance Techs, and otherwise, if they could get DPIs, they would be running them, even if they are extremely expensive, more than what a WEC customer P2 would be. Most folks would find a way, in some way, shape, or form. They would make it happen. But again, I know I'm repeating something we've said here before as well, but I know that another outlet has run quotes from one DPI manufacturer boss saying, oh yeah, they're for sale, you bet. And there are some readers who have clung tightly to that statement. The fact is, some very wealthy people are running privateer P2s right now and could afford those cars. And if they were truly available, they'd be using them. So it's the willingness. And as for right now, Graham, until new manufacturer agreements are written and IMSA maybe tries to insert something that compels them or, obligates them to sell whatever number to customers, we're going to be having this conversation until that provision is included, and who knows, it might never be included. So, as our friend Juan Montoya likes to say, it is what it is. Let's see. Well, we're getting here to the finish line. I'm going to take this one from Ryan Casillas, and then I think we have another one at the very bottom from this person of undetermined gender, region,
Shah Edam.
Yes, Adam.
No, it's not. I've actually done some looking into it. It's actually it's a Persian person very fond of Dutch cheese. It's Shah Edam.
Ooh, I like that. It's almost kind of appointed royalty here. Well, let's jump to Ryan's first. He says, with Scuderia Corsa and Michael Shank Racing making their Indy 500 debuts on Sunday, which sports car team do you think will take a stab at the Brickyard next, and which team would you love to see in the Indy 500? Well, 2 little quick points, Ryan. It is now Meyer Shank Racing. The team is now co-owned by the CEO of Sirius XM Radio, Jim Meyer, so that's a wonderful thing. And this is actually Shank's second Indy 500 entry, so also good for them. Definitely the first was Scuderia Corsa. Spoke with Giacomo Mattioli, the co-owner of the team with Art Zafaropoulou, I should say. Or I have to murder at least one person's last name, and I believe I just did that completely. My apologies, Art. In speaking with Giacomo, he told me that they are 50-50 right now to become a full-time entrant next year in IndyCar to go along with their IMSA GT Daytona program. So that does excite me. I would love to see that. Back to your question, Ryan. I keep hearing whispers and rumors that Wayne Taylor Racing might be interested in doing something in this space. I don't know if that's accurate or not. It's still accurate. I know the conversations have been held in the past with teams about possibility of partnering on something. I can tell you that Ricky Taylor and Dane Cameron will be here today at Indianapolis for Carb Day as guests of Team Penske. So they will be providing support for their teammates. And also, which is pretty awesome, I'm going to meet up with him and interview him shortly, Graham. Scotty McLaughlin, yeah, supercar ace, absolute ace, is here as well. So that's someone else that I'd love to see him in one of these cars. But
ask him about the possibility of that Volvo DPI. He's got Volvo in this history.
Yes,
he might know. He might know.
Well, yeah, I've heard that Calvin Fish has invested in running a new team, so all good there. I think it might be. I mean, Wayne Taylor stands out to be next. Ryan, as for who I'd really like to see,
I've got an offer. An offer. Well, of left field, but purely for the entertainment value. Bicollis Racing, without a shadow of a doubt. Squeezing a lot out of a little in terms of entertainment value. Joking aside, taking great strides forward. I just like to see the minnows. I like to see the minnows in there punching hard. We've talked already about with the Leena Gade story just how tough a discipline this is. Just get someone a little bit left field and give them a little bit of a room to breathe. I think that'd be pretty cool.
I'm going to go, if we're just talking fun, I would say, we need Magnus Racing. At least for one Indy 500.
Oh, yes.
Considering, I'm just trying to think of the general people in their sphere. And Andy Lally was a young hot shoe Formula Ford 2000 driver at one point. Andy's 44 now, 45, but considering he's a NASCAR Rookie of the Year, I mean, come on now. Champion sports car driver, Rolex 24 Hours of Daytona winner, etc., etc. Man, Indy 500 added to that, possible Rookie of the Year, Andy Lally, Magnus Racing, John Potter, and Sean Heckman doing some form of live stream, maybe for the entire month. That would be the thing, not just a 24-hour race. Actually start at the opening day of practice. Don't shut it down the entire time. That would be fairly phenomenal. So, and whenever I speak of Magnus, I usually always think of Rami Masroor, the delightful denizen there. I got a Facebook friend request from him, Graham, so maybe I need folks to weigh in on Facebook or Twitter as to whether I should accept that or not. I'm afraid of what kind of Borat-like bikini, mankini photos might pop up on my timeline. But you guys tell me whether I should accept that or whether I should fall towards my sensibilities of heck no.
Run for the hills.
All right, you want to take the last question, my friend?
Yeah, Shah Idam, the Persian Dutch cheese enthusiast, rather ironically asking, MP, you can eat only one food for the entirety of the 24 hours of Le Mans. Pick your poison.
One, I mean, if you say steak, then you're obligating yourself to breakfast steak, lunch steak, dinner steak, snack steak. I'm trying to think of what thing could we eat that either wouldn't cause heart failure because you've clogged it with red meat.
So frites and mayo are right out, unfortunately.
Yeah, what wouldn't clog up your system like cement? So that kind of rules out cheese.
The thing is, you've also got to weigh into this one. This does deserve proper consideration. Okay, we're not taking this lightly. Proper consideration that by the end of the 24 hours, whatever it is you've chosen, you will hate. So this is not just a choice for 24 hours. It's a choice to count.
Question we've gotten in quite some time. I don't like this.
Gummy bears have been the staple diet of daily sports car for a decade. I'm amazed we haven't actually had Haribo sponsorship, to be honest with you.
Wow. This is really good because it's so complex. I don't think I like Persian Dutch cheese enthusiasts anymore.
No.
All right, I'll throw this one out, and it does bum me out that you're right. I probably would not want to touch them for quite some time, but one thing that I've found that is relatively palatable at almost any hour, barbecue flavored Pringle chips. Yeah.
Now for me,
not heavy. They're not. It's not heavy, right? You can just have a few. The flavor's good, but not overwhelming. I'm not saying it's a perfect breakfast choice, but I am saying that at 3, 4 a.m. where you're hungry, grubbing them a little bit. But I got to admit, I mean, how many tubes of Pringles, barbecue Pringles, would one consume? And
if the pile went down, it would take half the press room with it, wouldn't it? That's the problem.
Well, yeah, and believe it or not, I don't actually want to find out. So what about you, Graham? Come on.
I'm going to tell you you're completely wrong. Oh, not completely wrong. That I would go for the Pringles, but it would be probably cheese and chive, sour cream and onion.
Oh, my God. You would... What would you smell like after 12 hours? Oh, my God.
What do I smell like after an hour anyway? I mean, with fairness, there is that. Happily, Shah Edam has actually missed nailing down that question because she's not asked it. She's not told us we can only drink one thing. We don't know if it's a she. It could be an it or a what. It could be confused. You never know. And certainly coffee. My God, coffee.
Yeah, that is a food group. That is a food
absolutely,
group for sure.
And some kind of caffeinated. Sweet beverage, but not an energy drink. I can't stand energy drinks. They're horrible things.
Coffee-drenched Pringles. Is that your suggestion?
Coffee-drenched Pringles sprinkled liberally with full-fat Coke.
Well, I love that sound. All right, as usual, this thing has fallen off the rails, but we would be lying if we said this thing was ever on the rails. Graham Goodwin, thank you for making time in the middle of a busy day, and thank you, dear listeners, for idiots rambling in the background, handing out awards that are just self-inflationing and self-aggrandizing. And we have IndyCar zooming around in the background. And I just had one of the patron saints of the sport, Mazda Motorsports boss, John Doonan, sit down next to me. So we're going to continue this conversation offline, Graham. Thank you as always, brother. Thank you to everyone for listening to the Week in Sports Cars, the Marshall Pruett podcast, presented by Cooper Tires and supported this month by Bell Racing Helmets USA. We will speak to you next week.